everyone. This is Gwendolyn. Today I'm chatting with Ali, and we're going to be talking about the houses of the zodiac. Welcome, Ali.
Hello, Gwendolyn. It's good to see you, and thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Thanks for being here. It's such a pleasure to speak with someone who knows their stuff about astrology, and I'm really eager to talk with you about this. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're just talking about the houses today, and we're going to go through house 1 through 12. They have their corresponding signs here that I've set out on this chart, so you can refer to those as we go through them. And Ali, I'm just going to invite you to start. What are your thoughts on house 1?
Before we get to that, Gwendolyn, I would like to give a brief description about the houses. What is a house? Okay, what is a house to begin with? Well, the house is that piece of the chart that allows us to see certain areas of life and how a certain planet, every planet is placed in a certain house. Okay? A house represents the areas of life that a certain planet will give its result into. Okay, so this is the house. We can go ahead and start with the houses. So we have 12 houses, and each house corresponds to one zodiac sign. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
So the first house, since it's the first house, the first indication is birth. So the first house represents birth, the birth of the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? It relates to the self, to the personality. And it indicates the basic character of the individual. It relates to the appearance, to the physical body, specifically the head. Okay? Because, the first house, it correlates to Aries.
Mm-hmm.
And Aries rules the head.
Mm-hmm.
So the first house is the body in general and the head in particular.
Mm-hmm.
The first house determines the physical constitution. Any planet in the first house will impact the personality, will impact the appearance. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
For example, Venus on the ascendant can make the individual quite attractive.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if she's a female, more often she will have curly hair. She will have big eyes. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so it can impact the individual by appearance. It can impact the individual by psychologically. For example, if a malefic planet is on the ascendant, and if the ascendant lord is not quite strong, this can show psychological difficulties, depending on the qualities of the planet. Of course, we should not judge. I always say this, we should not judge anything just by one parameter. We have to study many things.
Correct.
Like for psychological well-being, we need to examine the 4th house, we need to examine the moon, we need to examine the 12th house. The ascendant lord, we have to go through a lot to make a judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Mm-hmm.
We should not come to premature conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
So back to the first house. The first house is the most important house in the chart. Okay? It's the most important. For any great accomplishment in life, the first house has to be strong. The ascendant lord has to be strong. Okay? If the ascendant is strong, if the lord of the ascendant is strong, okay, this can override any potential difficulty found in the chart. Okay, if another area in in the native's life is afflicted, if the ascendant lord is good, it will override it.
Nice.
So it's important. It's important to have a strong ascendant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So of course, we're just talking briefly about each house. It's important to remember that everything under the sun, we have to fit into one house. So we can write books on each house.
Yes.
Okay, because everything in life, everything that we see, everything that we encounter, it correlates to one house. But we're just mentioning the most important, the most basic things that each house represents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to echo exactly what you have said, is that the first house is the beginning. Because it's the beginning, it represents, like Ali had said, the head. Aries represents the head, and each of the signs and houses correlates to a specific part of the body. But the one is the self. It is the persona. It is the planets that show up there affect how the person appears, how it affects their personhood, their egoic structure, their self, their it works in tandem with that ascendant because it shapes that personality. So I often see the first house as the house of the self, of the personality, how the outer shell appears to others. So that's a very good assessment of the first house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And what about the second? Yeah.
The second house, I'm a Vedic astrologer. And the second house in Vedic astrology, we relate that to childhood, early childhood experiences.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure if this is the case with Western astrology, but I've often heard some Western astrologers relate that to the fourth house.
Well,
What is your take on that?
Yeah, I consider the second house the things that we own, the things that we carry with us. So I could see childhood being included there in the second house, because I always define second house as possessions, assets, physical things, tangible things, things that we carry, things that we own. And so I see fourth house as parents, like mother usually. And then second house can be childhood. I see, because we carry our childhood with us, is part of what we own in many ways. So I can see it in that interpretation. Yes.
Yeah, and I've often seen it. It works really good if you look for events, or maybe look for an influence that happened, or maybe an event that took place during early childhood. You can see that clearly in the second house. So the second house, part of it is early childhood experiences and what shapes the way we look at ourselves. Okay, the self-esteem. Okay, in the physical body, it relates to the face.
Yes.
The second house. People with benefic planets in the second house, they often have lovely faces. Okay, they have beautiful faces. Yeah.
Yeah, because that Taurus is ruled by Venus. That is the house of Venus. So yeah, for sure, one of them. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you said, it's the house of possessions. It's the house of earning. It shows our ability to earn our resources, our ability to take responsibility. It shows our financial potential, the earning capacity. Malefic planets in the second house, it can show expenses, especially like Mars. People with Mars in the second house, these are the people who spend a lot. Okay, they might earn a lot, but they spend a lot. Moon in the second house, as an example, it can show emotional spending. Okay, so basically, it's the house of earning. It's the house of resources, anything that we acquire.
Yes, exactly.
Okay,
I like to tie things sometimes into the tarot And for me, this is the house of coins, the house of the physical, the assets, possessions. So
Yeah.
it's just in line with what you're saying here. Exactly. Because it's Taurus, it's earth. It is
Exactly.
the ox who plows the field. So exactly this.
Yeah. And the second house in Vedic astrology also relates to the family as a unit.
Okay.
Okay, it relates to the family as a unit. So this is one of the indications. I advise people not to get too confused about because we can see quite differences in different schools, even among Vedic astrologers themselves, even among Western astrologers themselves.
Of course.
Okay, you will always find differences.
Right.
Okay, when you think of education, somebody says it's the ninth house, somebody says it's the fourth, somebody says it's the fifth. Okay, when you think of media, somebody says it's the third, somebody says it's the fifth. Okay, but there is a fine line that divides everything. Okay, I advise people to just stick to what gives you results.
Correct.
Okay, speaking of media, third house is media and fifth house is cinema.
Nice.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I see that as well, because to me, Leo is about performance, and
Exactly.
Gemini is more about that mouth. I see it as the throat chakra with the communication of information. So yeah.
Exactly. If you relate, if I like what you do. If you get back to the sign that represents the house, you always get the proper indication.
Correct. Yeah.
Exactly.
So can you say more about the third house, and because I know you have a lot of you had mentioned to me about siblings, and can we talk more? What else about the third house do you see?
The third house, okay, let's go ahead. The third house is the house of siblings, and especially younger siblings, not older siblings. Okay, it's the house of neighbors, of peers, people that are equal to us in a way. Okay, people that we share things with, essentially. Okay, the third house is the house of will and drive. It relates to learning and the intellect. Okay, our capacity to reason. The third house is the house of skills and hobbies, and it's the house of media, as we were just saying. It's the house of media. It's the house of writing. It's the house of reading. It can show artistic skills, especially if it's related to the fifth house. It can show artistic skills. It can show skills in research, for example, if it's related to the eighth house. Okay, if it's, let's say, the eighth lord is in the third house, or vice versa, this can speak to it. What else is in Vedic astrology? It's the house of effort. Okay, it's whatever you put your energy into is the third house.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, that goes along with the hobbies and the skills and that sort of thing. I do see the third house as because it's Gemini. I see it as the house of shared information. So what you're describing, it relates to me like the classroom. Learning, sharing information with neighbors. It's talking. It's like, to me, I think of it as like radio, when we're socializing, things like that. And so I also look at it numerologically as 3 is social, creative, spontaneous. To me, it's like when you talk with your brother or sister and you're sharing information, or your friends, it's all of that. And it creates information and knowledge. So I see Geminis often as, intellectual, or, I also use the image for me as Gemini as like the person with the remote, and they're changing channels on the TV, and they're just absorbing information from every direction. So.
Exactly. And what about the card? What is the card for the third house?
Well, there's no specific card, but the three is Empress in the major arcana, which is the fertile, pregnant mother. And so it's where things grow. So I can see that with 3 energy is, things get, I sometimes see the Empress card more like Leo or Venus, but three is definitely communication. I see it as throat chakra, or throat. I always think of the radio DJ sharing information over the airwaves for three, talking.
Interesting, yeah. And the third house, just before I forget the third house, speaking of Gemini, I remember the use of hands. It can show skills using one's hands. So it can show writing, it can show drawing. It can show healing if it's related to the third or the eighth house.
Correct. Beautiful, Ali. Yeah, thank you for bringing that in, because that is some. I love that we also are connecting this with the parts of the body, because that is, I've seen charts where they actually show the body going all the way around from the head here all the way around to the feet, and so I like that we're addressing that as well.
Yeah, that's cool. And yes, some difficulties on the third house. It can show, like, I'd rather not get into that.
I support showing the strengths and the weaknesses, so I'm okay. I think it's good. I think more information is good, so feel free to talk if you'd like.
I know it's good, but sometimes I'm afraid to say one thing, and people who, I don't know who's going to watch this, okay? So sometimes people can freak out if they have this placement. Like, for example, I've seen if there is a malefic influence, if there is a negative impact on the third house, people can have problems with their shoulder, with their arms, okay? But the third house has to be brutally afflicted, okay? So we don't want to come to judgment.
Conclusions. Yeah. I mean, I guess what I hear in what you're saying mostly is that, the third house does rule the hands and the arms. So I think that is useful, that's very useful. And people, I see that too. It does have to do with that action oriented, as well as, sort of all along I see it as a line from the hand all the way through the shoulders, through the throat. And then, it's sort of like this plane of arms and throat, all the way through to the hands. Yeah. All right. What about our fourth house?
We should do one session on medical astrology, I believe.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
We discussed
I love that.
Yeah, we'll get into it. The fourth house is, in Vedic astrology, it's the house of mother. It's the house of nourishment. It's the house of comfort. We call it the house of happiness, essentially, okay? Because it relates to psychological well-being. And Vedic scriptures, it's called the house of happiness.
Nice.
And it's one of the most important houses to assess the psychological well-being of the individual. So it's the fourth house. Okay. And Western astrology, they relate it to childhood and to
the home.
Final stages of life. Is that what you related to?
I relate it mostly to sort of what you said first, was the home and mother and nurturing. And to me, 4 represents, the 4 walls of the home, and where it's safe and cozy and comfortable. And so I usually do relate it to parenting. Mostly the mother, because I see father showing up as in 10 as well, but it's home, nurturing, comfortable. It's all that home-based stuff. So yes, childhood, can also 2nd and 4th work there. But in relation to the parent.
Yeah, and speaking of home, it's the house that can show property, land, agriculture. It can show real estate. Okay, business and the real estate of if for example the 10th lord is involved, if the 10th lord is in the 5th, or vice versa, if the 10th and the 4th lord are connected, and the rest of the chart speaks to that, it can show gains through real estate,
property. Makes sense.
The
home, the house.
Yeah, and the fourth house is a very private house.
Exactly. Yes. Very good
It's a
point.
it's a very private house.
Yeah, because I see it as because it's Cancer, it's got the
Mhm.
shell, the protective shell, and the soft is inside. So I really do
Absolutely.
it. I see it in opposition to the 10th house, where 4 is private life, home life, and 10 is outer life, public life. So
Exactly. That's a good way of looking at the houses, because if we relate each two
mm,
opposing houses,
yeah.
okay, we can understand them better.
Correct, because it defines the axis.
Mhm.
I always look at it that way. So maybe as we get to some of the other ones, or what I'm happy to look at it
We'll
and
continue. We'll
correct.
continue with that. Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
continue with that.
good.
Uh, so the fourth house is more private, and the 10th house is more public.
Correct. Yeah.
If we can say that.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we move on to the fifth house. The fifth house is the house of children.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay, essentially, it's the house of children, and it shows our relationship with the children, the conception, the pregnancy. Okay, the entire process of reproduction. We can see that from the fifth house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if the fifth house is afflicted, it can show difficulties with around children.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, again, we should not come to conclusions. We need to assess the chart really with patience, and especially regarding pregnancy, we need to assess the fifth house from the moon,
Mm-hmm.
not from the ascendant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we make the moon the ascendant, and we examine the fifth house from the moon. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's the house of creation,
Correct.
the
Yeah.
fifth house.
Yeah.
Okay, it's the house of creation. It's the house of creative self-expression. It's the house of cinema, of art. It's the house of writing, authoring.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then if we look at the 11th house, which is exactly opposite the fifth house. 11th house is the house of publishing. So this is how these two energies relate. Okay?
Okay.
Yeah. In Vedic astrology, the fifth house is the house of intelligence. I'm not sure if this is the case in Western astrology. I'm not very familiar with
It's
Western
usually
astrology.
more third house, but I see exactly what you're saying, because I see the fifth house Leo as creative expression, things
Exactly.
that issue forth from us, like children, things that we give birth to, creative projects, children, anything. I even see it as like the actor on the stage performing that works with the cinema. So
Mhm.
I see it as solar, anything that issues from the solar plexus. So it's that
Mhm.
sun that radiates out. And so children, creative expression, creativity, anything that we radiate out of that, it's more like nurturing. I see the third house as the intelligence, the idea, but the fifth house would be the creative process of the
The
writing,
expression.
the expression.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then the 11th house is how we direct this
Mm-hmm.
intelligence. Okay, so if fifth house is writing, this is the creative process. 11th house is how we impact the world with that
Yeah.
expression.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what we bring into the 11th house is essentially what we did in the fifth house. This is what goes into the 11th house.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Two groups,
Yeah,
to the
I like this, because I see, for me too, the fifth house is the second vibration of the first house. Like if the first is the self, the fifth is the development of the self and the expression of the self. And then to me,
Mhm,
the 11th house is very much the audience, where,
mhm,
or humanity, where the fifth house, that creative individual that it's expressing, the 11th house is who receives it, and
mhm.
they get to enjoy the creation of the fifth house individual.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Yes.
nice. Okay, so
Yes.
what about six? Yeah, any more on fifth, or shall we go to six?
Yes, we should not miss romance and
Oh, amen. Amen. Romance, I consider fifth house romance, true love. You know, if you think of Leo, it's that red roses and the passion and for sure. But very important.
yeah, and it's gambling and it's investment. It's so many things. Every house is so many things.
It's
It will
gold.
just
It's like the gold, you know. I think of Leo
yeah
like the golden sun, the best of everything, the best champagne, the best fur, you know, everything.
yeah. One of my teacher calls it the house of joy.
Amen. Yeah. Amen.
Yeah,
Enjoyment for sure.
yeah. So the sixth house. The sixth house is basically the house of disease. Okay.
Hmm.
Difficulties on the sixth house. It can show physical disorders, depending on the nature of the planet that is afflicting the sixth house. It's the house of. It's one of the difficult houses actually. The sixth and the eighth and the 12th houses. These are the most difficult houses in the chart. So the sixth house is difficult because it's the house of disease. It's the house of death. It's the house of enmity. It's the house that shows struggle, delays, litigations, health problems. So this is the negative side of the sixth house. It also deals with our daily routine, with our servants, with our employees. Okay, so if somebody has a business, the employees belong to the sixth house. We see them there. The servants at home or anywhere, servants in general, they're seen from the sixth house. Since the sixth house is the house of health, we can see doctors, healers, therapists,
Mm-hmm.
massage therapists, Reiki practitioners, pranic healers, any form of healing, nurses. These people, they often have a strong sixth house.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, because in
Okay?
Western, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead. Please continue.
No, go ahead. That's it. Go ahead.
Well, it's very similar. What you're saying, I'm on the same path. Is that I see the sixth house as the house of health, you know, good or bad. So it makes sense that health practitioners show up there, doctors, nurses, you know, surgeons. But I also see, yeah, and similarly to what you're saying is, I see as the house of work, routine, daily schedules, you know, times of things, day to day routines. You know, it's sort of like I see it as the house of duty and obligation. Very Virgo, you know, hands on. You know,
Yeah.
so doing the work, showing up on time. It is the house of effort, of duty, obligation, routine, and health is what I see for Virgo. You know, as well as like precision, critique, things analysis. Like anytime you're breaking things into parts. So mechanics, for example, would show up for me in sixth house as well. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
timetables, train station. You know, all the
yeah,
details,
yeah.
schedules.
When you said Virgo, I remember the accountants have prominent sixth
Sure,
house.
totally makes
Yeah,
sense. Totally,
yeah.
because it is just like the second vibration of the second house. Where if second house is assets and possession and the money where it stacks, the sixth house is the second vibration of management of that. You know, counting the money, putting it into boxes. So yes, absolutely, 100%.
Yeah, we call this in Vedic astrology the Kama trine, which is second, sixth, and 10th.
Yep, 100%. Yeah,
Okay.
the same
Yeah,
elements. Yeah, unites them.
and these are the houses that brings in the wealth. These are the houses that deals with livelihood and resources.
Right. Yeah, because it's the earth. It's life on earth. It is.
Yeah.
It is the owning and spending of money. You know, it is that. It's where the earth goes. The coins element. So 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's lovely. Astrology is lovely.
It's so cool. It's so cool because it is so basic and yet complex at the same time. It attends to so many things, and it almost is like a whole nother language. You know, they look at mathematics as a common language in the world and physics, but in some ways too, it's a system of thought and understanding. And I love
Mhm,
it because it's so common. Everyone gets to participate because we're all born in a certain sign or house, you know? Or both.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Exactly. Yeah.
what about 7?
And then we've got to everybody's favorite, the
Yeah.
seventh house. The seventh house is the house of partnerships. Essentially, it represents the man in a woman's chart, or the woman in a man's chart, or the opposite
Mm-hmm.
partner in anybody's chart.
Yeah.
Okay, it shows the partner. It's the house of partnership, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's the house of business partnerships, not just personal partnerships. It's the house of contracts, and this is why it's related to marriage, because marriage is essentially a contract between two individuals. Okay, so it should not be related specifically to romance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's when people get together legally. This
Mm-hmm.
is the seventh house. Okay, when they sign that contract. Okay, the seventh house can deal with foreign countries.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in a way, because it's the fourth house from the fourth house.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
okay, if we make the fourth house the ascendant, and we count fourth, okay,
Mm-hmm.
fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. So it's the fourth from the fourth.
Mm-hmm.
So that makes it a home away from home.
Yeah. I love
Okay,
that. Yeah.
yeah. So this is how you see, one of the ways to see foreign settlement. Okay, and I've seen that works really good.
Yeah.
Okay,
That makes
besides, go ahead.
no, please finish what you're saying.
Yeah, I was just saying, besides the ninth and the 12th house, the seventh house is one of the houses I would consider to look for foreign settlement in a person's chart, or
I
maybe foreign travel.
Yeah, I echo that too because it is the house of the other. Like you're saying, I
Mhm.
contrast the seventh house to the first house, whereas if the first is the house of the self, 7 is the other, the partner, the when we go into the outer world, because it's our first transgression into that the other hemisphere, like whereas 1 through 6, you know, is kind of the development of the self and interacting. 7th is when the other people come in, and so 7th is that partnership. It is the, you know, like you say, it can be a personal partnership, business partnership, whoever we engage with as myself and the other, you know. And so it
Mhm.
can be the person or the foreigner. It can be the person we partner with. I like how you say it's about legal contracts. It's formalized partnership. I see. Totally.
Exactly. It's the
Mm-hmm.
formalized, yeah.
Yep.
It's the seventh house also deals with, up to a certain extent, it deals with the sexual relationship between two people.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, besides the eighth house, which shows the higher self of that
Mm-hmm.
relationship, but the seventh house is connected to sexuality. It's also, we can use the seventh house to see fame, because the seventh house is the house of other people.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and if, let's say, the 10th and the first lord are placed in the seventh, okay, or maybe the seventh lord is in on the ascendant, this can show people coming to the ascendant, so this can show fame. Moon, particularly in the seventh house, if it rules the 10th, 11th, or first house, or maybe the ninth house, 9th, 10th, 11th, or the first,
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we can see that in the chart of famous people.
Mm-hmm.
Any famous person has to have a good seventh house, because these are the people he will be interacting with. Okay, and if it's making good connection with the ascendant, and if the 10th house is involved, because 10th house is our activity,
right.
reputation and fame and our activity within the world,
Right.
then we can see clues from the 7th house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So on to the 8th house. The 8th house is again one of the difficult houses in the astrological chart. Okay, it can deal with sudden events, sudden ups and downs in life. It's the house of death and regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's where things die and are reborn again.
Mm-hmm.
It can show chronic illnesses. It can show injuries that can lead to death. It's also one of the hidden houses, so it can show deep hidden or maybe violent characteristics of the individual. We can see that through the 8th house. The 8th house is one of the psychological houses. Okay, it can show trauma, it can show crisis, and it can show transformation of that particular crisis, because a crisis is supposed to transform the individual.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, if we consider the Pluto for a while, if we think of Pluto for a while, Pluto is symbolized by the caterpillar that dies and is transformed into a butterfly. So it's set to rule Scorpio, the natural 8th house of the zodiac.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's this 8th house that transforms the individual through crisis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's very in line with how I view 8th house as well. It is the house of transformation. Sometimes I'll call it the house of sex, death, and taxes. But the image I use for it is the phoenix, which is very in the same lines of what you are saying, is that it's the bird that dies, through the flames, and then it regenerates. So it's the house of regeneration, rebirth. It is also the house of the hidden, as Ali is saying, because it's what's underneath. If we think of Scorpio in the deep waters, if we look opposing to the opposing sign, Taurus is what is above earth, and Scorpio is what is below earth. So it can be the house of the underworld, depth psychology, the hidden, the occult, the dark secrets. Sometimes it's the house of that taboo. As Ali was saying, it's the hidden parts of the psychology. So it's in almost direct opposition. It's the balancing out of the second house, which is things we have, things we own, things that are above ground. 8th house can also be the house of other people's money, whereas the second house is things of our assets, our money. 8th house is other people's money. There's where the taxes come in. That's where, I also say sometimes the house of financial loans. So receiving assets from others, inheritance, but very much regeneration, depth psychology, hidden, occult, the transformational things, what is in the dark, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. It is also the house of longevity.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
We can assess longevity through this house.
Mm-hmm.
And I think
that's good.
Yeah, and Vedic astrology, we call the 4th and the 8th and the 12th, we call them moksha houses.
Can you say more about what that is for us? What is moksha?
Moksha is a Sanskrit word that means liberation. So the 4th house, the 8th house, and the 12th house, these are the planets these are the houses that take the person to moksha, that liberates the individual, the soul of the individual. Okay, because these are basically the psychological houses. the 4th and the 8th house. And the 12th house, it shows the release, the transcendence.
Yeah.
Okay. The
Yeah.
culmination.
Yeah, because these are the water houses. This is the water where it's about the emotion. It is about the heart. It is about the emotional life of the person.
Mm-hmm.
I see
Exactly.
the connection with the heart chakra. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah. And the 9th house.
Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
The 9th house, it's essentially the house of Dharma. Okay. It's the house of Dharma, and it shows our principles, our values. It's the figures that inspire us, our teachers, our gurus.
Yep.
It relates to the law, to philosophy, to religion. Okay. Through the 9th house, we can see philosophers, we can see religious figures. Okay. Religious figures. It's the house of foreign culture, foreign travel. Okay. As opposite, we missed that on the 3rd house. The 3rd house deals with short distant journeys, and the 9th house is for long journeys. It deals with long journeys. It's one of the blessed houses. It's a house of grace. It's a house of grace and good fortune.
Yeah, because its ruler is Jupiter, the benefic, the great benevolent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The natural nine, Sagittarius. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And if it's strong, if the 9th is strong, it has also the capacity to override difficulties found in the chart. If the 9th house is strong, and if it's specifically if the Lord of the 9th is on the ascendant, and if it's in a good dignity, or if it's exalted, okay, it can give status to the individual.
Sure.
It can give honor and prestige. It's one of the favorite houses, I guess. Okay, it's a good guy, just like Sagittarius. Okay, it's a good. I love the 9th house.
Nice. Yeah, I see 9th house as very similar to how you're describing it. I see it as the house of philosophy, higher learning, sometimes higher education. Whereas if we had 3rd house as intellectual, 9th house maybe the professor. You know, it's the experienced, knowledgeable one. I see it as a wise, old, happy professor or that kind of thing. I also see it as religious, you know, the religion and the authorities within religion. I see it as the explorer. So kind of like what you're saying with the longest, it's the house of travel for me, the house of other cultures, other philosophies, other religions, and kind of like we're saying in opposition to the 3rd, which is like the neighborhood, the friends, the localism. 9th is the house of the foreign and the house of the travel and the house of, you know, now it's interesting here because I think this may be a fine-tuned point where we may differ is, to me, the 9th house is the house of publishing. So I see 3 as communication, local communication,
I use that too.
You use that too? Yeah, okay. So
I use that too, yeah.
Yeah, and so to me this is where 3 may be local information, 9 is public information. So it's information of like the great libraries of the world, the great sharing of the knowledge between cultures and others, learning through other cultures, learning through other philosophies. It to me is where I'll see you know, universities and colleges, higher learning showing up.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So, as well as I see Sag as very optimistic, fun-loving, kick up your heels. I see them as exploring the outer horizons. You know, I see, whereas Gemini is more like, let's talk with the local, let's form a social network, let's do friends and, you know, chatter. 9 is like, I'll see you later. I'm gonna go to Tibet and I'll bring back the truth with me. When I come back, I'll share the truth with everyone. So that's 9 is the archer explorer that shoots the arrow a little further.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good. It's always good to relate the houses to the signs.
Yeah.
Because this is where actually the house comes from.
Yeah, it's the natural character. It's the natural archetype of the house.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the 10th house. The 10th house is the house of karma. It's the house of action. It shows our activity within the world. And it's related to a person's vocation, the person's career. What is it that, I mean, when somebody asks me what I should be doing for a career, what is it that I should be doing? Okay. The 10th house should be examined because it essentially shows us what the type of activity that we do. Okay. The fruits of our labor. The fruits of our effort. What is the fruits of the individual? We see that from the 9th house. It's related to it's related to fame. It's related to high status. It's the house of father as opposing the 4th house, because the 4th house is the mother, and the 7th from that is the 10th house. It's the house of the father. It's the house of authority figures in general.
Yeah.
Okay, so it shows the government, the king, the president, the father at home. It's the house of power and authority. Bosses. It can show bosses. Okay.
Yep.
I like the 10th house because I do believe all planets do good in the 10th house. All of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because I cannot think of any planet that does not do good there, because any planet that's in the 9th, in the 10th house, especially if it's close to the cusp of if it's close to the midheaven, it will impact the entire life of the individual. It will be apparent. Okay, we can see its impact based on what this planet represents. We can see its impact on the individual's life.
For sure, because it is the outer action. You know, it is that. I also see 10th as career, what is done in the world, because like you say, as in opposition to the 4th house, 4th is if private life, what is done at home. 10 is what is done out in the world. So it's accomplishment, it's fame, status, reputation. If we look at the Capricorn goat, is climbing the mountain and climbing the walls. He's elevating himself to that position of, you know, authority, status, dominance, control. It's that 10th is us climbing the mountain in the world. And 10 is, so I totally agree, authority figures, father, influence, domination, top of the rank, top of the field, or expertise sometimes. Again, I see it also as government. Whoever's at the top of a structure is going to be 10th house, for sure. So fame, reputation, status, career, outer public action, outer public works. You know, that's to me is 10th house stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we've got 2 more houses left. The 11th house is one of my favorite houses.
I mean, too.
I like the 11th house. The 11th house is the house of friends, and it shows older siblings. It relates to our goals, to our desires, to our aspirations, and to the realization of those goals.
Yeah.
Okay. Also, all planets do good in the 11th house, especially planets like the sun. If the sun is there, in the 11th house, and if it's strong, it can show a person who achieves their goals with more ease and grace. Okay. By the way, I was just researching this. Speaking of the 11th house and planets in there, Jupiter in the 11th house can indicate that the individual is the firstborn baby in the family.
Interesting.
Okay,
because it's a blessing. Yeah, I could see that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm still researching that, and I just posted it on one of the groups that I do research with, and it's giving good impact. So you can research this too.
Yeah, look into that. That's cool. I want.
Yeah,
that's very cool.
So Jupiter in the 11th, it can indicate, and by the way, Saturn in the 11th gives huge wealth.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful.
Saturn in the 11th.
Because
but that will come later.
Father of humanity. It's sort of like what it is. I always see Saturn as father, or as, domination, strength, effort, and therefore discipline. And I see 11th as house of humanity. So house of like outer structures, outer collective, the friend, like you say, friends, networks, the sort of the group is how I see it. So
yes.
it makes sense if you have Saturn in the 11th, the leader of the group, the person who has the elevated place, there's a lot of, I can see that time and humanity, the benefactor. To me, it's like the good king or something like that,
Yeah, and it's the natural place. Traditionally Saturn rules Aquarius.
Really interesting. Because I'm always used to Uranus, but in the old school,
yeah, I use the old school rulerships.
Yeah. I like to look at those too, because I know for Pisces, Jupiter is the old school.
Exactly.
And now Neptune is. But that's interesting. I didn't know that. Saturn for Aquarius.
Capricorn and Aquarius both.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, just like Moon does good in the 4th house because it's the natural Cancer.
Yeah. And
Jupiter loves the 9th house. It does good there.
Right.
So Saturn loves the 11th house.
Oh, nice.
And the point you made about Saturn being the leader of the group. Okay, Saturn can bring structure to the group. It can organize, because groups without organization, they can fall apart.
Right.
They need Saturn there.
Yeah. Saturn for sure. Structure. Just I want to echo what Ali said, is that Saturn often is structure, discipline. It's not always fun. Sometimes it's hard work and effort and challenge.
Yeah.
But it builds structure, it builds character. Is how I see Saturn.
It's needed.
Correct. It's like a backbone. It's it's like
exactly.
Yeah. So
we should do a talk just on Saturn and Saturn related issues, like the Saturn return.
Yeah.
Because I see Saturn as a very misunderstood planet. People just fear it. People freak out for no reason. Just work with it. This is what I keep telling.
Bad, but it's not. To me, it's like, what I always use for Saturn is I look at it as like a coach, or a gymnastics coach, or a mathematics teacher. It will push you and push you and push you, but it's developing strength. It wants to give you strength through exercise, through work, through discipline. It's like, if you do your homework every day, you learn, you get to the next level. If you exercise every day, your physical trainer, that's Saturn too, because if you exercise every day, you get to the next level of health. So it's kind of like, I see it as the developer through effort, and it may be challenging, but it's also giving you more strength, more capability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this is how we mature, through difficulties, through challenges.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I love Saturn, by the way. It's my very favorite planet.
Oh, that is wonderful to hear, because that puts you in a unique place, Ali, and not everyone can say that. So good for I like them all for different reasons, but yes, I think Saturn is very underappreciated. Exactly.
I love Saturn. So on to the 12th house. The 12th house is the house of expenses. It's the house of decrease. It's the house of loss. Okay, planets in the 12th house, we can lose the traits. We can lose some of the traits of the planets placed in the 12th house. The 12th house relates to the unconscious mind. Okay, moon there, for example, it can show psychic abilities. It can show good intuition. If the third lord is related to the 12, it can show a very good intuition, powerful intuition. The 12th house is the house of foreign countries, distant countries. Okay, overseas. Okay, and it's related to isolation, both positive or negative. Isolation in the negative sense, this could be imprisonment, confinement, this could be asylums, hospitals. On a more positive note, this could be ashrams, this could be traveling to Tibet. Using your example, it could be just going to Tibet to an ashram there and just staying there for a few months. Okay, the 12th house relates to the past, and it can show karmic patterns from the past. Okay, because it's exactly before the first house. If the first house. If the first house is birth, 12th from it is the 12th house. It's the last house before the first house. So it's the last stages before birth.
Yeah.
Okay. We're getting to after death states here.
Right.
Okay. But this is what the 12th house is essentially. And on a more negative level, it can show mental discomfort. It can show grief, sorrow, and misery, and regret. Okay, it can show difficult psychology here. Yeah, if it's afflicted.
Yeah, I see the 12th house very similarly to how you see it, Ali. Is that 12th house? I do call it the house of the unconscious. To me, this is the house of dreams, the house of mysticism. It can go both positive or negative. In this, just like you said, it can be very mystical and spiritual in terms of the ashram, the connection with the one, the divine consciousness, the losing of the self, just like you are contrasting it with the house of the one. If the one is the house of the self, the 12th is the house of the losing of the self. Now that can be positive in that it's immersion and sublimation into the one, into the divine, the all, like as a graduation from the 11th house of humanity, the collective. The 12th is the next step. But it can also go into madness because it's Neptune ruled. It can go into neurosis or addiction. We can see problems with gambling or anything, addictions where you're being ruled by the unconscious mind. Things that are, if we look at it as an echo of the 8th house of things that are hidden, the 12th house is almost like a defocusing of that too, from the subconscious or the undermine until the very lowest root of not connecting with the conscious mind. So again, positive, it can show up as connection with the etheric realm. It can show up as that mystical vision and having connection to the unconscious, being able to access it. But it can also show up as, like you said, I also see it as the ruler of large governmental confining things like structures or mental institutions, jails, imprisonment. But equally, it has to do with like the hermit, the guru, the ashram, the mystic, the person who has connection. So I do see it as, you know, to me, I'm sun sign Pisces, so I really connect with this, and I sort of see it as a leading for me into my interest in astrology and interest in the dream world and the unconscious. But I also see that you know, sometimes they call the Pisces the lost soul. So, or some, you know, some people say this is where everything ends up. If you think about the sea, this is where things collect. So it's an interesting house. It's the dissolution and the sublimation of the self, and then we see the reappearance of the self in Aries. So
and this is a necessary process, as I see it, and this is where we all should head into. This is where we all heading into, actually.
correct. Yeah.
We're heading into, because the self is there. It has to go through everything it goes through, and eventually the self has to dissolve.
Correct.
It has to merge with what is.
Yeah. No, correct. 100%.
Okay.
With the one that is. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're getting there. We're all getting there.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is why I love the 12th house. It's one of the mysterious houses.
Yeah. Exactly. Very good. House of mystery. Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Along with 8th in many ways, but for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a very private house and mysterious house, and it can open great doors to the divine.
Amen.
Yeah. It's the house of divinity, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I see that for sure. That's so interesting. Yeah, it's such a pleasure talking with you about these things, Ali, because you have a understanding of it, and it really echoes my understanding of it too. Where, to me, the 4th, the 8th, and the 12th are all very private. It is all that emotional, internal stuff, and it's funny because I see a lot of the subconscious and the unconscious showing up in like 4th and 12th and 8, as like the hidden, the underworld. So it's fascinating stuff to look at this. I really so appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about this.
I like what we're doing, actually. Thanks to you. I like what we're doing. It's not, to me, it's not so easy to the people I talk to about astrology, they're not much, okay? I have only a few individuals that I can talk to about astrology. So talking to somebody and sharing this information, and we get to see things differently when we share the information.
For sure. For
okay.
sure.
Okay. So this is definitely a good opportunity that we're doing this video together. I like it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, you guys, I just want to say again, thanks for watching, and I hope that you gained something through this video, through more understanding about the houses. And if you have further questions or specific questions, feel free to put them in the comments, and either maybe me or Ali will attend to those. And then I just want to say you can find Ali a number of places. Definitely check out his Instagram account at ali.astrology. Is that right, Ali?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and feel free to contact either me or Ali. You can put information down in the comments, and one way or another, the message will get to us. So thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you again, Ali, so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Gwendolyn. It's a pleasure having you. It's a pleasure having you tonight, and it was a lovely conversation. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Likewise. Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.